Hi everyone, Tony Tonkin here from the Child Protection Party. I don't know if any of you had the wonderful opportunity of listening to Grace Tame and Brittany Higgins today, but they gave a speech at the National Press Club, which was outstanding. And I do want to celebrate these two wonderful women on the work they're doing around sexual harassment and assault and childhood sexual abuse or abuse in general, as per Grace Tame. I think it's important for all of us to note that there are some people out there who, apart from CPP, are fighting for the same issues that we are. And I wanted the opportunity to bring to you some of the thoughts that came from Grace today in particular, as she talked about child abuse, particularly how we need to work with the issues around child abuse and the impact that they have on kids. And clearly, as we would often say, the impact they have on those children when they grow into adults. So I'm going to play a number of clips. The first one I'm going to play from Grace's talk is around gender and the fact that we need to never forget that sexual abuse happens across all genders, and Grace clearly explains it in this particular video.
Sexual assault, child sexual abuse and domestic violence are all linked by this common thread of abuse of power. But each of these traumas is markedly different. The benefit in relating them is that it connects us as a community. But the dangers in conflating them include erasing individual experiences and undermining the need for tailored solutions. One of the more complex challenges I've faced in my work is walking the fine line between sexual assault and child sexual abuse survivor advocacy. Sexual assault is a distinctly gendered issue, and whilst I happily lend my voice to it, I'm not just an advocate for women. I am an advocate for all survivors of child sexual abuse, many of whom are male. We must preserve that nuance, every nuance in our discussions. We cannot forget our boys and we cannot forget our men, not only as welcome, equal participants in this ongoing conversation, and without ignoring many negative patriarchal customs. We cannot forget our boys and men who are fellow survivors of abuse. Yes, statistics say that perpetrators are more often than not men. Yes, statistics say that women are overrepresented in the survivor category. But statistics are not people. People are people, not political footballs, not disposable news items. People.
We need to be aware that sexual assault happens particularly in terms of the priesthood and the Roman Catholic Church and all the other religious organisations that have been involved in the Royal Commission into Institutionalised Child Abuse, that it stems right across the spectrum. And we should not ever think of child sexual abuse in terms of a particular gender, as Grace was saying. It is everywhere, and that we need to be mindful of where it is and call it out when we recognise that it is happening. And that's really what the Child Protection Party is about. We are the only political party who represents children and later on obviously adults who have been sexually or physically or emotionally or psychologically abused. Grace has many great points to make during her speech, and particularly I think it was important for us to identify that across this spectrum the issues around childhood sexual abuse impacts a lot of people, and it's right across all genders. And as she said at the end, it is not about the statistics. People are simply people, and that we must recognise when it happens to a child. We certainly must acknowledge when it happens. We must seek whatever help we can for children. And as Grace will explain later on, the funding in this particular area is woeful. And she brings up an analogy which I have brought up many, many times, which I think is worth noting. The next clip I want to show you is one where she's talking about children being our future. And this is also vitally important.
Repeatedly this year, I have seen the patterns of deception and deceit performed by predators mimicked in our halls of power. And that's just it. The federal government's approach to social issues seems to consist of nothing but empty announcements, placatory platitudes, superficial last-minute acknowledgements, and carefully staged photo ops, facades and false hope. Reviews, reports, delays and distractions, if not downright denials. All deliberate spin tactics designed to satiate the press and the general public. And so I conclude with something, hopefully, more constructive to take away. I conclude with 3 key asks to better our nation. The first is for a government that takes the issue of abuse in all its forms seriously. In regards to the sexual abuse of children and others, there can be no progress without accountability, as Brittany said, unless our leaders take full responsibility for their own failings. Abuse culture will continue to thrive inside Parliament, setting a corrupt standard for the rest of the nation. It rots from the top. And by full responsibility, I mean proactive, preventative measures, not these reactive band-aid electioneering stunts like acknowledging past harm at the last minute. If you don't take a strong stance to condemn abuse, you enable it.
This is why it's important to acknowledge that the Child Protection Party is unique, because we're not interested in the structures of power, but we are interested in influencing decisions that are made by those structures. We are a political party which is really about developing a future for our children, which will ensure them to have a safer and more secure life ahead. I only hope that there are more people out there who acknowledge the importance of working for the betterment of kids. It's an area which has been ignored. We're the only political party that does represent children right across the spectrum, not just around childhood sexual abuse and other abuses, but certainly in terms of education and disabilities and other areas as well. We are the only political party that represents these children, and you, as a voter, I think is incumbent upon you to consider supporting us so that we can ensure that your children and your grandchildren have the futures that they believe are important. The next clip is about a culture of abuse, which Grace also talks about, and she has some interesting things to say about this as well.
We tend to think of child sexual abuse in terms of physical acts, but in reality it is mostly invisible, characterised by calculated, insidious, systematic, psychological manipulation that leaves its survivors with lasting, internalised, complex trauma. Trauma that is not only reinforced by negative social attitudes, but also, ironically, by the very systems and institutions, the structures designed to protect us, to bring justice, like the courts, like the press. Such is the vicious cycle, or rather tangled web, of abuse culture. And thus we see the effects of abuse persist long after abuse itself stops. How beautiful, for instance, is the freedom of speech. I haven't always had it. Many still don't. So if those of us with a voice don't use it to fight for what is right, to fight for those without a voice, then what hope is there? What is the point of platforms like this? What is the point of life if not to connect, to communicate honestly and openly with one another in the pursuit of progress with whatever means possible? What is the point of awarding someone for their work only to stifle them while they do it when it gets too real? I'm here because I made a conscious decision to stand up to evil, and I have been calling out injustice ever since. To retreat into silence now would be hypocritical. What's more, we are still seeing it pervasively, subliminally weaponised. As far as I'm concerned, you either fight it or you are a part of it. The federal government is prepared to spend over 90 billion taxpayer dollars on submarines that might be ready by 2040 to combat a potential offshore threat. 2.4 billion of that has already been wasted. gone. Now, compare that to what they're prepared to spend on the very real epidemic of violence against women and children affecting 1 in 4 today here at home. Just 1.1 billion in total. And if we just single out prevention education, which is where the real hope for change is, the numbers are even sadder. In 2019, the federal government announced it would spend just $2.8 million over a 3-year period delivering a sexual and domestic violence prevention education program in schools called Respect Matters. But in reality, less than half of that amount was given without explanation. As my friend Shana Bremner, founder of End Rape on Campus Australia, pointed out, there's around 4 million students enrolled in schools across the nation, according to the ABS. So, from 2020 until 2022, if you divide the 1.36 million they actually gave by 4 million students, it works out that the federal government had planned to spend 11 cents per student per year on prevention education. 11 cents per student. This is because we currently have a government that is primarily concerned with short-sighted, votes-based funding, not with long-term, needs-based funding. And what we need in order to create real change is meaningful investment in our children, in their education, because they are the future of our nation.
So I think the important thing here is that the Child Protection Party is there to fight for all those things that Grace has talked about, that we want to fight for freedom of speech. We want parents to particularly talk about the issues that have happened to them, and later on kids to also be able to articulate about their experiences while in care. All these issues are important, and we are your voice. I echo all of the sentiments that Grace has mentioned in just a few of these clips. If you wish to have a look at this clip, the whole entire session with Grace and Brittany, you can go to look up YouTube, National Press Club, or iView, and I'm sure you'll be able to find an appropriate link. So we want you to participate with us, and in particular, we want you to consider donating to us to help us so that we can move ahead in terms of getting ourselves organised for the coming election. Join with us, be a part of the Child Protection Party so that you too can make a difference. Thanks everybody, take care, look after yourselves and be safe.